afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Healy. I'm Chairman of the Board of the Hingham Selectmen. And joining me today is the Town Administrator, Ted Alexiadis. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to be discussing two issues of importance and of interest to the town. The first is the police investigation that was initiated in April of this year relative to the anonymous letter that came into the department, into the Selectman's office concerning two of the candidates, and the other a little more focused on road issues, which continues to be a source of interest. Ted, just by way of background, I think a little bit of perspective would be helpful here in terms of giving the residents a greater understanding of what led to this investigation. Anonymous letters are something that I think people serving in government get from time to time. So what makes this so different than we received an anonymous letter last fall in connection with an employment action that was being taken? How did this letter in the police context rise to the level of warranting an investigation? What triggered it?
Well, if you recall, the anonymous letter we received a year ago regarding a town employee, I was asked by the board to investigate it, and I'm asked by the board, this board, and previous boards to look into a variety of things in my role, and anonymous letters have never really been the culture here in Hingham in the 20 years I've been working here, but they have seemed to taken a life of their own the last 2 or 3 years. So ordinarily we prefer just to simply, if we have to, investigate them internally and close out that issue. I think the contrast with the police anonymous letters, we received 2 anonymous letters, one right after the other, in relation to the applicants applying for the police chief's job. Now, the police chief's job is a fairly important job in a community. It is the one area that deals with people's personal freedoms, and even the selectmen don't have the ability to intercede in certain criminal matters that the police are investigating, appropriately so. So there's some lines there, and what we found in those letters were, at least in one of them, were that there was information contained in there that clearly came from within the police department, from internal records in the police department, and that's a very, very serious concern. I think I know that is the primary reason why Chief Perrano wanted the investigation started and why Chief Olson continued it.
And just by way of background, Chief Perrano was serving as the chief at the time.
Correct.
And what were I was there, I obviously know, but for the benefit of the audience, what were we doing in connection with the police department that led to these letters coming into the board?
So we had advertised for the police position because Chief Perrano had announced his retirement and gave us enough time to move through the hiring process so that we didn't have a period of time where we didn't have a chief on board. And so we were in the middle of the interview process. We had selected 4 candidates to interview, and we got the letters right in the beginning of that process.
Okay. And from my own experience, it was clear to me that what was in the initial letter could only have come from within the department.
Well, that's clearly what Chief Perrano suspected. I think at that level we have to take the chief's word at some level, although I certainly took a look at it, as did members of the board, in making their determination that we should move forward with an internal investigation. Because it was clear to, I think, the layperson looking at this, or maybe we're not completely lay people in this regard, that that information came from within the department. Why is that important? That's important because the police department maintains records on all of their activity and in their interactions with the citizens of the town of Hingham and any citizens that come through Hingham. They maintain criminal databases that they can search histories on, and all of those are provided by state and federal authorities, with strict controls on how they are accessed and the information that is disseminated from them, because one of the most inalienable rights of Americans is the right of privacy and free from government intrusion. So if a police officer goes into one of those systems, we have date and time stamps on them and a lot of controls to see that who was there. Now what we can't do is we can't prevent someone from going into a system, taking information and distributing it. So when we find evidence that that's occurred, we take it very seriously, because protecting the public trust is paramount to the police department. They cannot do their jobs without the public trusting them.
Okay. And as I remember, last year, the board took a vote not to act on anonymous letters in any way, but yet there was a concern that essentially a leak within the department had occurred here, and that was capable of being repeated in the future if we didn't somehow seek to address how that came about and who, if anyone, that we could identify was involved.
Correct. I think the compelling issue here is that if someone within the department leaked information that was not supposed to be released to the public, then clearly they've shown a propensity to do that, and that's a danger for us, because there's other bits of information that could be very, very harmful to individuals if it was released, unfair and inappropriate, and we could have liability on the part of the town.
So Chief Perrano addressed us. He made this request, and it's my memory that as a board we agreed that this was important. There was no question here. So can you tell us, please, then, what Chief Perrano did to affect this investigation and the steps that were taken?
Sure. The chief retained the services of a private investigatory firm, Matthews and Associates. It is run by Mr. Matthews, and
what's his background?
Mr. Matthews is, I believe, a retired, I think it's deputy superintendent of the state police, but he was a fairly high-ranking state police official before he retired, and a significant part of his role in the state police was investigating internal issues. So he's familiar with the subject of internal investigations, comes with great credentials, and did a very thorough job. As you know, you have a copy of the report now, and
Sure.
We've made certain parts of it available to the public as per state law. And I think you'll see as the public will, as they look at it, that it was very, very conclusive, and it did identify the things that we were concerned about.
Well, to that end, what kind of investigation was it? There was, as I recall, a series of interviews. Is that right?
So they interviewed everybody involved, everybody who touched the letters, who saw the letters, and a number of employees within the police department to try to narrow down where the information came from.
And was the record base, the database itself, investigated to determine how there could be a tag? I think you mentioned a while back that there was some kind of tagging.
Correct. It's called an IP address, and when people log on to computer systems, they leave a fingerprint, an electronic fingerprint. It tells us the computer that logged on, the user, the ID, and so from that we've been able to see who accessed the payroll and personnel records, because that's the nature of the information that was in the report. And we can see individuals accessing it on those specific dates that are included in the report, and we can see them doing that in proximity to the releasing of the letters. So I think what the investigators have done is draw some conclusions that, or draw, point to the evidence that is fairly compelling right now.
Okay, and I know that when I received the letter addressed to me, my response was to turn it over to the chief of police. And can you tell us, please, what the investigators did with the actual letters themselves in terms of trying to discover whether or not there was any physical evidence that.
Well, the investigators took all the information that we got and ran fingerprint analysis on them to determine, possibly who handled them, and maybe determine who authored and who sent them and where that information come from. And they were able to identify some fingerprints on the letters. Those fingerprints belong to Matthew Hersey, and of course, we now know that Matthew Hersey's come forward saying that he's the author of those anonymous letters. And
Okay.
while that is one part of the discussion, what we haven't gotten from Mr. Hersey is whether or not the information came from within the department and how. And so we're still looking at that. Mr. Hersey doesn't want to speak with us at the moment, so we'll have to continue on.
Okay. Is the investigation, has it reached a point where it's gone as far as it can go, or?
I do believe it's concluded at this point in time, and I think the Board of Selectmen has a request right now to appoint an independent hearing officer relative to discipline on one individual, and I suspect that will likely occur on another individual in the near future.
Okay. All right. I think it's important for the public to appreciate that while this cost a bit of money, the integrity of the department and the information that it gathers in the course of its duties is perhaps, how do I word this? You can't compromise the trust and the faith that the public has in the department's ability to do its work. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that, Mr. Chairman. There are certain positions in town, and police officers are one of them, where they need to be at a certain level beyond reproach. For example, we know now that if an officer is found to have lied under oath or in a situation where it's determined they're untruthful, then their ability to work as a police officer is severely handicapped. Because under law now, the prosecution in any case has to identify to the defense that the arresting officer, has an information in his personnel file that would speak to untruthfulness, which means it becomes very difficult to prosecute cases. So
that officer can't be called as a witness, basically.
Correct. And so that officer can't be on the street because they cannot make arrests. And we need our officers on the streets and being able to do that. And so it is important that that kind of integrity is maintained. If the public, I don't know if the public is completely aware. I wasn't before I became a town administrator. When I was a finance director, I didn't delve into that side of the business. As a town administrator and working through regional dispatch, you learn more about what the police department does and how they prosecute their day-to-day responsibilities. Every traffic stop is recorded. And if you're pulled over for a traffic stop, it's recorded. And if you are given a ticket, it's recorded. If you're given a warning, it's recorded. And any other interaction that you have with the police department is maintained.
Absolutely.
For very
decades.
legitimate reasons. But what the public, I think, has an expectation of is that that information is maintained in privacy and not indiscriminately accessed or indiscriminately distributed. And so again, I keep coming back to that same point. When you have an officer or police personnel that has accessed information and released it to the general public, it crosses a line similar to truthfulness, where it really speaks to that person's effectiveness to be able to do their job and the public to trust them.
I agree. I remember many years ago when I served as a Hingham police officer, part of the training experience that we got was exposure to the files from earlier decades. And it was pointed out internally, of course, some very famous people interacted with the police department. You'd never know it now, of course, but I think that people have an expectation that their business to a certain degree is going to be kept quiet. And, not everybody has finer moments all the time.
Like I
So-
said earlier, I think one of the inalienable rights of Americans is the right to privacy and to be free from government intrusion. It's a right that a lot of citizens of the world do not have. And so
Yes.
when we talk about freedom isn't free and we celebrate the veterans who do so much to keep us free, we gotta understand what that means. And we shouldn't be degrading that on our own.
And as we sign off from this particular topic for the time being, I take it that Chief Olson is working with you in order to bring this to a conclusion, and at some point we'll probably speak to it in greater detail at a
Absolutely,
meeting.
it's the chief's highest priority. He needs to
Sure.
clear this off so he can move forward.
It's not good for the department to have this
Absolutely not.
lingering
Absolutely.
in any way, shape, or form. It's too bad that this has happened, but I'm glad that we've been able to identify the problem, and we'll go about correcting it. Let's turn to another subject. Earlier this year, we had, I think, what can only be described as an epic winter, and our roads have paid the price to a certain degree.
Second year in a row.
Let's talk about that a bit.
I'd love to talk about it. Much more enjoyable than the previous subject.
Sure.
Obviously, we have work we have to do regardless, but this is the fun part of the job. Really getting out there and being able to serve people and provide them with resources and benefits that they're looking for. The town.
Well, what do we do now?
So
How does that all
I'll
work?
sort of back up to that a little bit.
Okay.
In 2009, the town embarked upon a rather substantial road building budget and road building process, recognizing
What does that
that
involve?
for the previous decade or so, the town hadn't allocated as much resources to roads, the repaving and reconstructing of roads throughout the town, that we'd seen an overall degradation in the quality of the roads. And we rate roads in a variety of different categories, from excellent to poor. A poor road is a failed road. What we want to try to do is fix the roads the step before poor. We call it fair, or pre-failing. And those are the roads that we've tried to get to and fix as soon as possible. Because at that point, the road needs minor reconstruction, we'll call it. When it moves from that category into the next category of poor or failed, we see a cost escalation of 5 times. So if we might have to spend $100,000 to fix a road that is in fair condition, we let it deteriorate a few years and it starts to fail or fails, now we're looking at a $500,000 expenditure for that same road.
Let me stop you there. As I understand it, if you look at a cross-section of a roadway, you have the tar, the asphalt, which would be considered the finish course, and then you have the base course, and then you have the sub-base. And a roadway in fair condition perhaps may have the finish course compromised, perhaps the base course, but the sub-base would be intact. A road in full failure would probably need what's called, sometimes referred to as full depth reconstruction,
Correct.
and that's a much more expensive undertaking.
And that's the 5 times. What we see also, though, Paul, is, and it makes sense if you think about it, is that deterioration doesn't move smoothly. It's not a linear line on a graph, but it's more of an arc, because roads are pretty durable for a long period of time, and then they start cracking, and then the water gets in, and then things start deteriorating very rapidly. So we see a lot of the fair roads move into poor quality pretty quickly. And so the approach the town took in 2009, so we're about 6 years, seven budget cycles in, was to spend the majority of its money on the roads that were pre-failure. Makes sense, because they can spread their money further and they could stop the bleeding into a road system that will cost much more to
That would,
replace.
in effect, extend the life of the roadway.
Correct. The problem that occurred is that that left some failing roads not fixed. And those are more expensive because those require a full depth reconstruction, and they'll take a whole chunk of the budget in that given year. The other thing that was pointed out was an increase of funding. And so the town dedicated additional funding moving towards hopefully a number of 1.3 million, and I think we got as far as 1.1 million. We couldn't add that extra 200,000, which is now, I think our target is 1.4. And so while we've deployed a lot of resources in the last 7 years, we haven't gotten to the target we wanted to, but the benefit has been that what we thought would be a 20-year window, we've narrowed down dramatically because of those successes of the work within the engineering and the highway departments. Some of the things we've done is we've aligned in the last 5 years the subsurface replacement of pipes through gas utilities or water utilities.
Just going to ask you about that.
And we've matched their schedule with our schedule so that we're replacing streets after they've gone in and replaced the pipes, not before, so we don't see those unsightly cuts.
Well, let's talk about that. At last Thursday's meeting, a representative from National Grid came in, along with Harry Sylvester from the DPW, with a request to open up the roadway. I believe it was on Whitten Avenue. Mm-hmm. Now the pipe there in that particular area is 100 years old, but that's on a schedule. That roadway is on a schedule to be repaired in the near future. So this schedule that we keep hearing about, what does that mean? If you're a resident, what do you take away
we determine what we think the roads are that need to be worked on. At the same time, the utilities make a determination based on their budgets which roads they can work on. And they have leaky pipes throughout town, whether it's water or gas, and old pipes that they need to get to. Sometimes it's extension of service. We don't have too much with the phone company, even though they have stuff in the ground, electric too. But mostly it's gas and water. And so they come to us with their proposals, and we try to match them. So when we move roads around, sometimes it's because the utility has identified a gas leak that they are no longer able to avoid. They need to go in there. They hadn't planned it maybe, and now they're ready to go in. So we're going to change our process around so we can follow up with them. Now, one of the reasons we want to follow them is that we've come up with an arrangement with all the utilities that rather than they replacing the cut that they've made in the road and filling it in with asphalt and whatever flowable fill is the term we use. I try not to use jargon.
Sure.
As much as I can, industry jargon. But when we fill those trenches, and you see them, they're about 1.5 feet on the roadway. What we do now is we take the money, the value of that the contractor, the utility was going to expend, they give it to us, and we add it to our overall road building budget. So we wind up saving money on both sides. The utility saves money, which goes to rate, and we save money, which allows us to spend that in fixing more roads.
Gives us the ability to expand the maintenance that we perform on the
Correct.
existing roadway structure.
But the most important thing it does is it avoids us cutting that road again, because every cut into the roadway produces a seam that water can get into and that ultimately will crack the roadway and deteriorate it. So I think those are some of the successes we've had in the last 7 years, where we've utilized the utility companies to help out, so we're not tripping over each other, and we've allocated more funding. The other, of course, we've also done great with some competitive bidding on the cost of the material to put in. But I think that's been contrasted by the last 2 years of horrendous winter weather, which is really the worst thing for roads. These roads would look much better in Southern California, I have to tell you, than here in New England. Since
in responding to that, though, we have a plan.
We do.
And let's talk about
that. So as the board has asked me to develop a proposal to provide more funding, this is a budget year where we have less resources than we've had in the past. So what I'm going to be recommending to the board in conjunction with our town engineer, Roger Fernandez, is a larger but short-term window appropriation, several $1 million I'll be asking you for, along with administrative costs to support the initiative, to spend $600,000 to $700,000 on the roads in each of the next few years, allowing us to capture the remaining failed roads we think that are out there and stem the tide of any of the fair roads that we think the last 2 years have accelerated. And Winton's a good example. Winton and Holland Lane area, when we looked at those roads 7 years ago, they weren't in the condition they are now, and they were slated for a longer time repair, so they're not on our schedule. But we can clearly see now that the reality of the last 2 winters has changed that. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to go back and, we'll rework the entire 5-year road building plan and present it to the board, hopefully, in the January, February time period, so we can get ahead of the construction season. I think we're set up for this construction season already, because a lot of that planning work occurred in the fall last year. But we hope to be able to add some new roads to that this year, and we hope to be able to add significantly more roads each of the next 2-3 years.
And in that time, I would imagine that there'll be a great deal of activity going on beyond what's happening now in the course of this maintenance work. What can the public expect?
Well, I think they're going to see a lot more of the DPW within their neighborhoods. I can tell you that while the DPW does a great job in managing traffic issues regarding road projects during the summer, that'll be a challenge if we expand the road building process as intended, and we'll have to ask people's patience because you really can't drive on the road while we're repaving it. I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and so that'll be challenging without a doubt. People will forget that they wanted the roads when they can't get home or they can't get around town as easy as they used to during those busy months. That's a necessary cost.
As the winter approaches, it's nice and warm now, but it could be snow next week, which I hope isn't, because I truly understood what snow means for a municipal budget.
Everybody, I have this saying, everybody loves snow until they come and work for the municipality. And by the time they leave their service, they realize what snow does to our municipal budget and how hard it is. And it looks really pretty and nice.
Absolutely.
But it really drains our resources. We spent $1.9 million last year clearing the snow and ice off of town buildings and town roadways. We budget $500,000. It's a big bite.
But we'll be ready if there is another big winter.
Absolutely. Every year we're ready.
Good.
We have all the equipment. I mean, I think the public can take comfort in, we've had 2 of the worst winters, and we were there each winter. Now, I understand that not everybody gets plowed immediately. And last winter was particularly challenging because of the proximity of the storms and the volume and the inability for us to relocate it. Because we got to a point where we couldn't plow it.
Right.
We had to actually truck it out. And that's a very tedious, time-consuming process, because snow fills up a lot of volume but doesn't weigh very much. So the trucks have to move quite a bit. And I think we all saw the pictures of I think we called it the snow farm down at the
Sure, at the bathing beach.
At the bathing beach, and I actually had to be concerned that we didn't have people climbing over those mountains, because they were
fall into a void.
Pretty dangerous.
Well, I think we pretty much used up our time. I'd like to thank HCAM for hosting us here. I'd like to thank the DPW for the good work it does, as well as the public safety folks that we've got working for the town. It kind of, the rubber hits the road in this difficult weather, and we have a very, very good crew across the board. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.